So Ted, what are the top 3 things that people need to know about refrigerant tracking?
Only 3. Well, the first big one you should know is that about a year and a half ago, we started the phase down in the refrigerants that you're most familiar with. And we're in step 1. Step 2 is next year, and that'll drop the available refrigerant to almost half of what you're familiar with. So we use about 600 million pounds of refrigerant for maintenance annually, so we'll be down to around 310 million pounds next year. 2, and by the way, raise your hands if you're familiar with refrigerant. Okay, so most of you are. Raise your hands if you're familiar with R410. Okay, so you're going to need to change that refrigerant in about another 18 months. So starting in 18 months, the phase down on the GWP limit begins. So you'll find that you're not only having to choose new pieces of equipment, but new refrigerant types to go in the equipment. This will be big. This will only be for new equipment, but it'll be very impactful, which is roughly 5% of the market right now. The third big thing there'd be some competition here in the discussion. So I'll skip to one that I think will resonate. Your Scope 1 emissions are largely made up, your fugitive emissions, of refrigerant. And so accurately reporting these, and I think your name is Jordan, you brought it up. It's a very important topic. You will be responsible for including these on your 10K filings, which means they'll be audited and reviewed by numerous other teams of people that historically were not familiar or even aware of the size of the impact. So your Scope 1 emissions will likely be made up more than half by refrigerant emissions. And many of you have probably done an amazing job of capturing your equipment inventory, so you probably already know how many millions of pounds of R22, 410, 134A you already have in place. But for those of you who don't, you might want to pay a little bit more attention to that because it will become a really big part of your future. The first reporting year will be 2024, so we have about a 7-month window before we really need to have some accuracy there.
We needed the bar open a little longer before we started talking about all that. That's awesome. Ted, can you share a little bit more about how you measure success at TrackRef, and actually just explain to people what TrackRef is, that they might not have reference?
So this is my 29th year managing refrigerant. We used to be recyclers and handle cylinders and help with reclamation. But we turned into a software company because the challenges of managing the information to get to your actual leak rate is challenging. You know, it's largely data that's parked in a work order system or on an invoice somewhere. So we decided that would take this journey to help people expose and understand the leak rates so they could better manage it. And typical leak rate in the United States is very high. It's about 20%, and 20 is a good number. We leak 600 million pounds in approximately 2.4 billion pounds of installed capacity. So helping companies understand that is really at the core of what we try to do. And we're not just about capturing data, it's about driving leak rates down. And we've been fortunate. We have a great team, highly effective, and through a partnership with Fexa, we'll be able to leverage that data and really streamline it, heading towards that push-button access to data.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. You had something to add?
Yeah, just for perspective, we don't aggressively track our refrigerant usage or fugitive emissions rates, but we assume a leakage rate of 35% for reporting purposes. And that's probably on the low side, to be quite honest. But that's the best we can do at the moment.
So Ted had mentioned 20% average. You're saying 35%, and that's not even conservative. That's just, you know, total swag. Okay. So
I like Josh even more because normally I'm the bad guy. So this is fantastic. Today just keeps getting better. But I was afraid to share the real numbers with you because it really is a big number, and most companies don't track it. So when you have to turn this over to your CFO, you want to choose a number that you can live with, because if you choose too low a number, then you can never go below that number. And so just keep that in mind. It's a very awkward conversation at first, but in order to get to that number, Josh, I imagine the hardest challenge you had was figuring out how much of this do we really have?
Awesome. Great segue into Josh. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what you're doing at Dollar Tree. And I loved your question, Jess, around like, where do you actually start? Because there's so many people who, ESG is sort of a buzzword, right? Everybody knows there should be doing something, but some companies are literally, they might be doing something, might not be telling the story. Dollar Tree's investigating net zero goals, right? Investigating potential net zero goals. Can you share a little bit more about what you're working on at Dollar Tree, the ESG program?
Certainly. So just real quick, when you guys hear Dollar Tree, I imagine you automatically think of sustainability innovation, right? Me neither. I used to joke that the only thing green about Dollar Tree was our logo. But sometimes companies have transformational moments, and when you have to take a hard look in the mirror and you realize you have to change your die. And that happened to us last year. There was a bit of an incident at one of our distribution centers in West Memphis, Arkansas, involving a rat and a Pringle. Google it. It's great fun to watch. But once that got out into the to the metaverse and went viral, as the kids like to say, that created all kinds of pressure on us and forced us to take a hard look and say we have to do better. Our investors want us to do better. Our board of directors wants us to do better, and that's really where the impetus came. I'd like to say that our story is that we came to ESG organically, and that we're doing it because it was the right thing to do. No, we were doing it because we have to do it, because we have very activist shareholders now that are forcing us down that path, that have passed resolutions to push us to a net zero future, which is not a bad thing. I mean, for an organization like us, our footprint is immense. We have a transoceanic supply chain. Our Scope 3 emissions is 83% of our portfolio. I impact Scope 1 and Scope 2. You guys all know what those are. Scope 1 is emissions directly generated by your organization. Scope 2 is the downstream emissions you get from your power, your electricity, things like that. So we put out a sustainability report a couple years ago where we committed to a 25% reduction of our Scope 1 and 2 emissions by the year 2031, which you think, wow, that's really cool. That's really very soft. It's a very soft goal. And we had very nebulous goals around Scope 3, about our supply chain and the requirements we were going to have with our suppliers for emissions reductions targets. But that's all changing, and we're going to be announcing soon what our new goals are. Our investors demand it, our shareholders demand it, and now our C-suite demands it, because all those folks that were in the C-suite positions when this little transformational incident happened down in West Memphis, Arkansas, they're gone. Our several large investors saw that as a wedge to force some change on the board of directors and in our C-suite. So we have an entirely new field of leaders that are committed to ESG, that live it and breathe it, and they're moving us down that road to it's a pretty exciting future. It's a little terrifying, an organization of our scope with as many locations as we have and the impact we have through our supply chain. It's going to be a big challenge, but it's going to happen, and it's become more top of mind. And if you're a publicly traded company, and I'm sure there's a couple of you out there, the SEC is, they're coming out hard and fast with some reporting requirements, which Ted alluded to, which you're going to have to report this stuff, and it's going to impact all of you directly as FMs, as the caretakers of the data that goes into this reporting. It's going to impact your life pretty drastically and pretty quickly too.
That's awesome. So can you talk a little bit about the low-hanging fruit? Because, when you mentioned, where do you start? We'll start with the low-hanging fruit and start with the things that maybe you're already doing or you can already make a quick impact on. Can you share a little bit more about things like technology, LED lighting, those kinds of things?
Yeah, and Jessica kind of stole a little bit of my thunder early on that, but that's okay. When I first started Dollar Tree, when we first started strategizing around sustainability and ESG, that's when you do what's called a materiality assessment. You look at what you're doing, what you could be doing, and what's important to your associates, to your management. And we found out that, probably much like all of you, we have random acts of sustainability that we're doing that we never thought about as sustainable practices. LED lighting, high efficiency, I can't even say it. You know what I'm saying? HVAC. Various other energy standards, energy management systems that we put in all of our facilities. But none of it was as part of a holistic program. So you bring all that together, and those are really the starting points, and you start telling your story from there. And then you build upon that. Like right now, we're looking at advanced technology and energy management and how that is going to impact our business and how we can further drive better carbon footprint reduction, better energy efficiency in our stores. Start looking at your supply chain and what you can do to reduce that footprint as well. So it's you start with the easy stuff and then you progress towards the harder stuff, and that's how you build out your program.
That's awesome. Keith, I know you're not responsible for ESG at Chipotle. That's a separate team. Yeah. Keith's like, whew. But can you share a little bit more about what Chipotle's goals are and what they're doing?
Sure, yeah. Thank God I don't have to manage that every day. It is, it's a nightmare. But there's a lot of things we do at Chipotle where we're always thinking about the farmers, the food. We're always thinking about taking care of people along the way. We are actually opening 30 to 40 all-electric locations this year as part of our goal. We've just been approved in our C-suite to do 30% next year, which is going to be 100. By 2026, we want to be net zero on our new locations. And doing little things in a restaurant, we're doing little things like putting panels on the side of our exhaust hoods. That cuts back on the HVAC going out. That cuts back on the makeup air. Those little things are big impact, from LED lighting to air conditioning to energy usage, that it's so easy to do that. So our goal is net zero by 2026, 2027 on all our new locations. And right now we're looking at 300 a year on average going forward, give or take here and there. Yeah. Thank God I'm not managing it again.